Welcome to Charity Therapy, a podcast from Birken Law about building better nonprofits. I'm your host, Jess Birken. Hello and welcome to this episode of Charity Therapy. Today I am joined by my good longtime friend from grad school, Noah Gerding.
Hello.
I love how far back we go. It's so fun.
So far back. I know.
Noah is just a kick-ass fundraiser. He's currently working as the development director of the Shalom Foundation and is a consultant with responsive fundraising. Noah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the space. Thanks for the invite. How can we
Absolutely.
not connect after all these grad school years?
I know. Well, we just, we keep popping into each other's lives periodically. And I feel like I really just want to do all of the questions in our best Minnesota because you and I end up riffing really hard on our Minnesota accents. And it is always the highlight of hanging out with you.
You still my beating heart, or should say heart.
Oh, for cute.
Oh, for gosh, we have to stop. Oh my goodness. Okay.
It's going to come back and I'm not ashamed. It's going to be super fun. Just let it fly. It's that kind of a podcast.
Here we go.
Okay.
Let's own it.
Okay, so here we go, Noah. I know a huge theme in your career.
You're not really going to start that way, are you? Okay, let's do it. Let's go.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
Don't edit that out. I want the listeners to hear the Minnesota in all of its glory. All right, no, in all seriousness though, a big part of your sort of professionalism is about this responsive fundraising. And I feel like at the basic level, fundraising is just this messy human process. And it's really not an area that works like this simple machine where you just pull a lever and presto, changeo, you get more money. And I think it's one of those things, especially for smaller nonprofits, and I don't know, maybe it's true for bigger nonprofits as well, where people get really frustrated and discouraged when what they're doing just isn't working. So do you have any quick tip on what is your sort of framework for how to improve what you're doing in fundraising?
Yeah. I think it'd be easy to say, well, just focus on the relationship with your supporters. I mean, that's a given, right? Whatever kind of supporter type it is. But I think specifically organizations and frontline staff and leaders need to understand how people give and the meaning and the motivation behind the gift. Are they externally motivated? Are they internally motivated? Each of which comes with its own set of unique and individual KPIs, right? And so any framework that you have to begin the process to think about who is in your supporter base and how they give and why they're giving, the human attribute aspect of the relational side of philanthropy, the more you know behind the gifts, you can steward them how they want to be stewarded.
I love that. People are not just wallets that just randomly open. I love that. Yes. Okay, let's dig into our questions. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Our first question. I recently came onto the board for a small but nationally affiliated nonprofit. We are facing a cash on hand crisis. Ruh-roh. And looking for any and all ideas. We lack any type of major gifts program. Everything is always events and grants funded. While I know a major gift program isn't going to solve the immediate cash issue, am I wrong to suggest that major gifts should be the real strategic focus? If you could see my face, listeners, on this one, I'm just
You're cringing. Are you? This
Where's
a cringe?
the sad tuba sound effect? I don't know what you're going to say about this. I'm so curious.
I mean, I just want to hug this listener right now because this individual is 100% spot on with as what we just led in with, right? The major donor, the deep supporter, that's the relational side of the work. oftentimes I've found that getting out of that whole donor acquisition, special events, lens of raising revenues is so time bound, and it's exhausting, and it's a burner outer. That's not even a thing. It's a burner outer. And
It's a burner outer.
it's a burner. It burns people out. It burns volunteers out. It burns lay leadership out. It burns boards out.
Well, if you're always chasing the next grant or prepping for the next event, you have no like long range planning a lot of times.
A lot of times, and you have no time to actually develop a relationship with those that are already in your corner. And so, absolutely, they are not wrong in identifying the need to lean into major gifts work, because that's the messiness, but that will allow in time the budget malleability that it sounds like this person needs and this agency needs.
I'm going to push back on it just a little, because the reason I'm cringing is I feel like I can see the tweets on fundraising Twitter where the person is like, we just need major gifts. I'll email Oprah. You know what I mean? Because they're facing a cash on hand crisis, they're panicking. And so I feel like the major gifts program is coming from a place of
crisis,
scarcity, crisis, panic. We just need somebody to give us a big chunk of money, which that might be real. And I don't mean to undercut their feelings, and I'm sure it does feel that way. But I would encourage you to go through a bigger process of thinking about what is your major gifts program. It's not just somebody to save you from your cash on hand crisis right now, but it's a long-term strategy. And it's not something that you can like build in a second. Like these are relationships that have to be developed over time, I'm assuming.
Correct. These are, that's spot on. And these are relationships that are, take anywhere between 3, 5, 7+ years to really nurture to a point of that budget malleability that we talked about. And so, I think as this organization would look at this type of acquisition fundraising and the feeling that they're stuck in an annual, giving churn, if you will, if I can use that word, there may be those supporters who have been with them for a long time already that have been giving towards these annual asks. And as a top tier segment, I would begin with the length of time somebody's been supporting the organization and start with them and be vulnerable enough to share the story, not the crisis story, but the real, like, this is where we're going as an organization. And what do you think about it? Is this right?
Yeah, I love that. Like they have the beginnings of a major gifts program probably right under their nose. They just need to
press the pause button and look. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is really hard when you're strapped for money. All right, next question. I'm going for foundations and smaller pots of money with the idea that these are a more likely bet than these super competitive large grants we've been applying for. We always get far in the competition, but we haven't been successful so far. My thinking goes something like, I need to triple my output, assuming I won't win most of the proposal requests that I submit. If I'm assuming I could win 1/3 of the proposals, then I need to submit 3 times as many at similar request amounts. What do you think about this approach?
Whew. Let me just clarify, because we got the plan here from the listener is to triple the revenue raised specifically from institutional supporters. Is that how you?
That's what I'm hearing.
Okay.
Their task, I guess they've been assigned, like they're like, hey, we need 3 times as much money from grants, especially foundation grants.
Okay.
So they're thinking, I know I'm not going to get this many, for every 4 grants I put in, I'm going to get 1. So I've got to like exponentially increase the amount of applications I put out.
Okay. Yeah. So from a workflow standpoint, it sounds like this question is rooted in like the tactical.
It is rooted in the tactical. I'm just not sure that their calculation is right.
Well, right? Like that's where I was going. Like so can I just offer some counter questions or some counter inquiries?
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, we don't have more facts, but we'll just make them up. Do it.
Let's just go. Make them up. So, I mean, some of my questions, at least to get the baseline here, would be like, what percentage of the total contributed revenue is already from this segment, like as a total budget? Like, and how, to your point, like how many of your future I'm doing air quotes, like triple the revenue foundation targets are existing or new. And what's a smaller foundation defined as? Like these are all critical things. And like, what's the basis for this triple thing? I'm stuck on this triple with you.
I know. I'm like, oh, back the truck up. Which board member told you had to triple the grant money?
A board member that might not have done fundraising? No, I don't know. No, probably not. Maybe so. But
Maybe
it's
so.
like, does anybody, to that point about board members though, is there anybody in that network of supporters that's already has relationships with some of these smaller pots or family foundations? Or again, I don't know how they define a foundation. So
the thing is, so first of all, I can hear all the consultants out there crying that this person got good advice and didn't take it and is writing into the podcast to get a different answer. So the senior consultant discouraged me from this mindset. Well, I want to talk about like, why would they discourage you? I think there is a certain reality that you maybe need to target better.
yes. Yeah.
You know,
and
instead of just taking a shotgun approach where you just blast as many BB grant applications out into the world as possible, how about really narrowing your focus on people who are
right.
likely to give or who have funded you before and developing those relationships to go deeper for bigger money? Or like, why would we?
Correct. Yes.
I don't
And
know.
like, I'd also want to know, like, is this one person doing it? Is this a half FTE blasting all this stuff into the world? Is it with a contract grant writer? Which still, like, what does that responsibility function, that budgetary function look like internally? And to your point, like, let's be smart and intentional about both the time and the prospecting. I mean, I would at least start with that and think critically about that. And what this whole triple goal meant,
what's it grounded
means,
in?
where is it rooted, right? What is the triple factor? Sounds like a game show. What's it rooted in?
Somebody else from the same organization as the other question. They have a cash problem. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't like the starting presumption that I'm going to assume I won't win most of the grants I apply for. It's like, well, if you start there, then you won't.
Of course, that's going to be your goal that you achieve. Of course, you're not going to get it because you assume that you're not.
Yeah, I feel like there's not a great answer here.
There's not a great answer. And, you know, to those impartial consultants, those coaches, those mentors out there, and again, the two of us didn't know much else about the nitty gritty of the situation, but I do tend to agree. Like, let's pause and let's talk about the why behind the triple first.
Yeah, and assuming that there's a really compelling reason. Maybe it's like there's an incredible need in our community and it's exploding and we need to like level up to meet that need. Great. Why not go to a funder you already work with and tell them the story about how this need is exploding and we need to like meet it? Because why not just try and get one or two huge grants instead of trying to apply for 175 thinking that you will only get 10?
Focus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just, I'm sorry, your consultant was correct. Don't bring this mindset into it. All right, moving on. Here is our final question. Hello. Hey there.
Hi.
I want to say hello back when the people are like, hello.
It's better than greetings.
Greetings and salutation. Hello, I am the Director of Development, and I am looking for a good way to help my fundraising team track our progress as a whole and as individuals. I'd like to develop some good KPI templates, but I'm not sure what we should track. Any ideas? And KPIs, listeners, means key performance indicator.
So when we start talking about KPIs, we tend to want to get in the weeds. And I think we'll dance around that, but I think, it's a lovely question. And candidly, I think as we think about our time, our commitments at work, like we want to know what we're doing is either working or if we need to course correct. So to that end, I personally always been confused with organizations that have KPIs and metrics that are not at all rooted in things that the staff or team can control.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll say that we open this up by saying that this is messy, wonderfully joyful, beautiful work, but it's messy. and it's human. And generally, what I've found is the things that matter, like truly deeply matter, are not predictable and kind of inefficient. Instead of assuming or like proposing, like, you need to track these 5 things. And if we're talking about institutions or individuals, like, pause that button. I guess I'd go back to, what does progress mean, both individually and as a team? What does fundraising actually do for the agency or organization? And is there an alignment with an annual revenue plan or some larger strategic initiative that's maybe over multi-years?
And I'm going to make an assumption here, just based on this question. They're saying, I'm the director of development. I'm looking for a good way to help my fundraising team. But it sounds like they have no measurements in place. So I'm going to kind of go out on a limb here and say this is actually a very small nonprofit. This is a board position, because sometimes boards have a director of development and the team is a bunch of volunteers. Because if this
Absolutely.
was like an organization that was big enough to have a paid staff who was a director of development and a department of people, they probably wouldn't be asking this question.
Or even a department of that one, right? The question would be different.
Yeah. So I'm going with, this is like somebody who's new and they're trying to kind of figure out what it looks like to track fundraising success. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head with, like, there are some things that people go to because they think that's the right way to measure it when it's not.
And that's where the trouble starts, when they think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. So I think just to like blow that out a little bit, I can share a story just from from the law firm, right? Like, I was working with John Grant. He's a coach. He's amazing. I love John Grant. Shout out. And we were talking about, KPIs and measuring things. And I was resisting sort of like dollars measurements because I'm not particularly motivated by money. Obviously, my practice is working with small nonprofits. But what we ended up doing was measuring client touches, with the idea that, like, the more interactions we had with our clients, the better our firm would be doing overall, because we're a client experience focused firm, and more interactions with the client is going to result in more work or whatever, because I do need to buy groceries. Like, even if I don't really care about the money as like a goal. So we actually measured, like, how many interactions did we have? And I feel like that lends itself in a way to like a fundraising environment where it's like, this is about relationship. So maybe one of the things we measure is, what are the things that we're doing that touch the relationships? I don't know.
That's right.
Just spitballing.
I think you hit it on the head. Like, we could go down the road of, assuming like there's a plan for every single donor, and then there's a tiered and qualified caseload, and then there's how each donor plan rolls up into a monthly, quarterly, annual forecasted budget, and then let's further assume that each type of outreach tactic is segmented. And pause. We need to pause. So I think you're right in that a lot of great starting points are, what is realistic as a human doing this work, especially if we're assuming that this is a volunteer. What's realistic in a week and in a month? And then what do those touches look like, or what do those engagement points look like? And I would hope that if we're valuing the relationship over the revenue, that there's a good sense of, more often than not, there's not an ask, right? Like, more often than not, it's just, hey, this came up, right, and we thought about you, or saw this. What do you think about that? Thought you'd be interested in something, So
right, because I think the knee-jerk response to somebody who's just starting out and trying to figure out what to measure is, how many times did we ask? How many dollars did we raise? How many grants did we apply for? And those are not necessarily the right things to measure.
It's not meaningful.
And you can't force people to give. So measuring your success by the amount of dollars that came in it sounds intuitive, but it's the wrong measurement.
Exactly.
It's not the thing that leads to the dollars coming in. You need to measure the things that lead to the dollars coming in.
Also, the things that you measure should be in your control. Like back to what I said before, like, and those,
Totally.
what you just said and what we just talked about, like those are the things that you can control. You can control how many phone calls, how many coffees, how many visits, how many social pings. Like you can control emails and all of that. And you can control.
And you can count how many kudos did you get? How many positive comments on social? Like the good things coming back to you that are a metric of like you're engaging positively with your community. You can measure those too. Like I measure Google reviews, right? Maybe you're not going to measure that, but you might get an email from a donor that's like, hey, I gave and I'm so happy with what you're doing. And hash mark, there's another one.
Mm-hmm. Agree. Yeah, that's a great question. That's a really great question.
It is a really great question. And I love taking it from the idea of like the beginner's mind, because I feel like that's where we have the most ability to be like, don't go over there. That's the danger zone. Come over here. This is where you can be successful.
Yeah, exactly. That's the prime fulcrum of where we can actually change this whole narrative and system. Yep.
Well, I think we have a couple of takeaways from these that really all circles back to your first comment. It's focus on the relationship. Don't focus on the dollars, focus on the relationship. Understand your donors. What does it mean to them to give to you? What is motivating them? Are they externally motivated or internally motivated? Focus on the relationship. And then I think another one that stuck out for me is if you're in crisis, first of all, that's not a good mental place to be in for planning.
No, I've been there.
But,
I get it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
A cash crisis does not equal send an email to Oprah. So if you're developing a major gift strategy, come at it from a place of looking at your community, developing those relationships that you already have, and knowing that that is a 5 to 7 year process and it's not a quick fix.
It takes time.
So don't let your board pressure you to hurry up and turn around some major gifts. It's a long, long process because, again, it's all about the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one maybe is measure what you can control. I love that as a takeaway. Mm-hmm. When you're measuring success, don't hand away your power and be like, oh, I guess I failed because people didn't do what I wanted. They didn't respond to my 600 grant applications I sent out. Measure what you can control.
Right.
Well, Noah, I know you're on LinkedIn.
I am on LinkedIn.
And you're doing something exciting this fall here in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. Where can people find you this November?
Yeah, so I am going to be at Neighborhood House for one of our new to Minnesota responsive fundraising road shows. And it's really just a peer learning event where, a lot of the strategies and tactics that we talked about through these questions today, it's kind of a cool primer for what's to come. And so I'm hosting it alongside other executive directors and fundraising leaders, and just so we can all collectively think about meaningful relationships, how to track some really good things that are in your control, and walk away with some really great frameworks for how to think about fundraising, development, and stakeholder communication. So it's at November 4th, and I'm happy to share those event details with you or put them in
the show notes.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So my folks in the Twin Cities here, oh yeah, come on down and visit with Noah on November 4th, eh? Okay.
Yeah. I'm just grateful to have this space.
I'm so glad to hold it open for you there, Noah. All right.
Oh, boy.
If you enjoyed this episode, do me a huge favor. Share it with a friend. Rate, review, subscribe on your podcast app. I swear to you, it really helps me out. Let's get this done. Click the button. If you have a question or a story to share, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a note online or leave a voice memo by calling 612-208-9120. Thanks for listening. All right, folks, that's our show. Be sure to follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Jess Birken. We want to hear from you. Send us a message at our website, charitytherapy.show. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at birkenlaw.com/sign up. Charity Therapy is a production of Birken Law Office, PLLC. Our theme song is by Whalehawk. And remember, folks, this podcast is produced for your entertainment and is not a substitute for actual legal advice.